Hey folks, this is Pat Quinn with the JoBlo Movie Network welcoming film fans worldwide for another round of Show Me the Sequel. As always, we're focusing on a genre film that never got the follow-up it perhaps deserved. I'll start with a quick recap, share some behind-the-scenes stories, and then pitch my concept for a sequel. Today, we're going to talk about a film that most people haven't seen, even though the director has made some of the most popular films of all time. I'm talking about Peter Jackson and the 1996 release, The Frighteners. When Peter Jackson was only 18 years old, he bought a 16mm film camera and began shooting what would eventually become his first film, Bad Taste, an over-the-top splatter comedy about aliens who come to Earth to eat people. 20 years later, he began shooting not one, but 3 films, one of the most popular and successful film trilogies of all time, The Lord of the Rings. But the film that was his transition from cult filmmaker to Hollywood A-lister was The Frighteners. The film stars Michael J. Fox as Frank Bannister, an architect who lost his wife 5 years ago in a terrible car accident. Head injuries from that same accident have cursed him with a strange second sight. He can see and communicate with the spirit world. Embittered over the loss of his wife, Frank has given up his career and partnered up with 3 spirits. They haunt houses, which he then offers to cleanse of all ghosts for a fee. A series of mysterious deaths have taken place in Fairwater, the small town where Frank lives. Locals are worried that it's related to a murder spree committed back in 1964 by Johnny Bartlett and his teenage girlfriend, Patricia. Bartlett killed 12 people in the local hospital before being captured and executed. Frank runs into the spirit of the most recent victim, Ray Linsky, who has a number carved in his forehead. Frank offers to pass on a message from Ray to his now widowed wife Lucy, played by Trina Alvarado. They meet for dinner, but when he goes to the restroom, Frank sees the shadowy figure of the Grim Reaper carving a number into another victim. Frank chases after him, but the Reaper escapes. Suspicious of Frank's abilities, the police bring him in to be questioned by FBI agent Milton Dammers, played by Jeffrey Combs. With Lucy's help, Frank escapes and discovers that the spirit of Johnny Bartlett is killing again. They try to save Patricia, who's now an adult and played by Dee Wallace, but things don't go to plan. The film ends with a spirited confrontation with Johnny's ghost in the now abandoned hospital. That's the basic plot, and believe me, I'm leaving a lot out. My main issue with The Frighteners is that Peter Jackson tries to cram maybe too much into it, but then again, nothing succeeds like excess. Regardless of its flaws, it's a great film, and you should definitely rent it. But let's talk a little bit about how the film got made. Peter Jackson was able to sell Bad Taste at the Cannes Film Festival, which helped finance his next film, Meet the Feebles, a dark and twisted musical comedy starring a cast of puppets. Basically, it's a XXX episode of The Muppet Show. It's worth noting that Meet the Feebles was also Jackson's first collaboration with Fran Walsh, who would go on to be his partner in life and in film production. Another first-timer was Richard Taylor, who has overseen the special effects for every Peter Jackson film since Meet the Feebles. Their next film was Heavenly Creatures, which garnered Jackson and Walsh an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. It was also the film debut of actress Kate Winslet. In the course of filming, Jackson and Walsh came up with the idea for The Frighteners. Director and producer Robert Zemeckis got a hold of their treatment and thought it would make a perfect follow-up to Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Knight. An interesting side note, another script that Zemeckis was considering was From Dusk Till Dawn, written by Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. But to paraphrase the old Hollywood expression, Quentin and the Crypt Keeper never got in bed together. At one point, both Tim Burton and Sam Raimi were in discussions to direct The Frighteners. But when Zemeckis read the completed first draft, he asked Peter Jackson to direct. Universal agreed to a budget of $26 million, allowed Jackson to film in New Zealand, and gave him the right of final cut. Not bad for a guy who 10 years earlier was filming puppets singing songs while having sex. Robert Zemeckis knew that Michael J. Fox was a big fan of Heavenly Creatures, and suggested him to Peter Jackson. Dee Wallace was cast because she had just done E.T., and audiences wouldn't expect her to be playing a psychopath. Jackson sought out Jeffrey Combs after seeing him in Reanimator. It was Combs who suggested the Adolf Hitler-inspired haircut. Shooting lasted 6 long months, and it was during this extended time in New Zealand that Michael J. Fox decided he was tired of being away from his family all the time. When he returned to the States, he signed a contract with NBC to star in the sitcom Spin City. The Frighteners was his last leading part in a film. A fun side note, one of the 3 house-haunting spirits was an old man with white hair called the Judge. He was played by John Astin, best known for playing Gomez in The Addams Family. During filming, Fox kept referring to the actor as Doc, confusing him with Christopher Lloyd's character in Back to the Future. Post-production lasted 18 months, due to the overwhelming number of visual effects. Peter Jackson had formed Weta Digital to create the effects in Heavenly Creatures. This being only their second film, the effects company struggled to make the release date. The film came out on July 19, 1996, which unfortunately was also the opening day of the Summer Olympics in Atlanta. On top of that, the marketing made it look like a traditional horror movie, which confused audiences. Then Independence Day opened the following weekend and buried any chance the Frighteners had at the box office. Its worldwide gross was less than $30 million, only a few million over its initial budget. Even though the film was a disappointment, Universal had already agreed to let Peter Jackson film his remake of King Kong. But first, he was a little preoccupied making The Lord of the Rings. After that, he made Lovely Bones, which paired with Heavenly Creatures and The Frighteners makes for a very strange but interesting triple bill. A special edition of The Frighteners was released with 12 minutes of added material, and apparently Jackson shot so much footage a 5-hour cut could be released if anyone was interested. More recently, there were rumors that Charlize Theron's production company was looking at a television series based on The Frighteners. That might seem like an odd combination, but bear in mind her company was also involved in David Fincher's Netflix series Mindhunter. But they've since denied that the concept is still in the works. The original concept is great and open to new stories. Plus, how cool would it be to see Michael J. Fox back on the big screen one more time? That being said, here is my pitch for a sequel to The Frighteners. It's been 25 years since the murders in Fairweather. Frank now lives in a small town in Oregon where he runs a marijuana dispensary. Frank discovered that certain strains of marijuana muted his second sight, and for the most part stopped him from seeing ghosts. He's been trying to find the perfect strain of bud that will keep him spirit-free without any side effects. To test it out, he goes to an old cemetery and fires up a big fatty. It works, he sees nothing and hears no one. Leaving the rest of the joint on a gravestone, he goes back to his car to make some notes. A gardener working nearby has smelled the weed and finds the joint. He takes a few hits, and suddenly he sees every ghost in the graveyard. Frank rushes over to calm him down and realizes that the weed temporarily stops his visions, but has the opposite effect on anyone else. The gardener tells him the scariest part was seeing the Grim Reaper. Frank gives him a pen and paper and asks the gardener to sketch what he saw. It looks a bit like the spirit of Johnny Bartlett. That night, Frank does some research. There have been some odd murders over the years, but the police have no reason to think they're connected. He also finds a series of blog posts by a man who claims they're all the work of one person. The next morning, Frank reads that a man was found murdered last night, not long after the gardener saw the Grim Reaper. When Frank asked the local sheriff about the blog posts, the sheriff says the author's wife was murdered back in the 70s. Now he's a conspiracy nut who claims there's a serial killer in town. Frank arranges to meet up with the author who runs the site. The old man tells him that his wife was murdered while they were camping in the woods. The cop said it was hippies on drugs, but he knows it was some sort of demon. He's convinced this demon has killed 10 others over the past 50 years. He even has a photograph he took with a night vision camera. Frank places the gardener's sketch next to the photo. It's the same Grim Reaper-like figure. Frank agrees to help the old man try to catch the demon and avenge his wife. They go back to the old cemetery. This time, Frank stays sober, but gives the old man a few hits of his special weed. They both start to see spirits in the graveyard. Because the old man has lived in town for so long, he knows quite a few of them. According to the locals, there's a mean-spirited ghost who lives in a forgotten crypt at the edge of the cemetery. He only appears a few times a year. One of the ghosts casually warns them to keep an eye out for Butch. They find the crypt half hidden in the ivy, and Frank manages to pry open the door, but something inside begins growling. It's Butch, the ghost of a long-dead Rottweiler. It chases them across the graveyard until Frank traps it in the cemetery's chapel. They go back to the crypt, and see an urn of ashes behind a locked wrought iron gate. Oddly, there is no name anywhere in the crypt. The only other thing in there is a beat-up acoustic guitar leaning in the corner. They hear barking. Butch has escaped, and they have to make a run for it. But Frank manages to grab the guitar as they scramble to the car. The guitar is beat up, but still plays. Carved in the neck is a name, J. Emerson. He was an old blues musician who is famous locally but never made the big time. They go to a blues club in Portland that's been around since the 40s. The place is known to be haunted, and they find the ghosts in the middle of a spirited jam session. They tell Frank that J. Emerson was amazingly talented, but there were rumors it was only because he made a deal with the devil, just like Robert Johnson. He wasn't as successful as he should have been because he had a violent temper, and the only thing meaner than Jay was his dog Butch. Because of his devilish deal, Jay's spirit rises from the dead every 5 years and drags a murdered soul down to hell. They go back to the crypt, and with the help of some of the other ghosts, manage to hold off Butch and Jay's demonic spirit until they can get his ashes to the chapel and destroy them. The film ends with the old man visiting his wife's grave, and after a few hits of Frank's weed, he has a reunion with the spirit of his dead wife. There you go. That's my pitch for a sequel to The Frighteners. I hope you liked it, and thanks for watching the show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends who dig this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We are an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.